Finally, after 4 very long weeks of break, we get to make our way to the Circuit of Americas, which hasn't been here for a while, but has given us some very good racing moments. The track in Texas is made for Formula One racing, and it's provided some very cool moments in a very short time period. The track itself was made in 2012, which actually resulted in Lewis Hamilton's last victory in a McLaren. Now, this was a completely different time period, and in 2012, Vettel was doing very well in this season, so was Alonso, but the McLaren was also very quick, especially in the hands of Lewis, who, as I said, got his last victory here. Moving a little forward to the Lewis and Rosberg days in Mercedes, there was the famous throwing of caps on the podium exchange at the very end of the race. This started off with Nico in pole. He was driven pretty wide by Lewis. He ended up actually taking the lead back again, and then eventually Lewis made his way through, ended up winning the race, and kind of gave Nico a little toss of the cap. But then we're going to move forward, and there has been plenty of decent moments between this time period all the way to 2021, but the biggest one that I can vividly remember was Max and Lewis completely destroying everybody on the field by 40 seconds, and it was pretty close amongst the two of them. And while there wasn't many overtakes, Max displayed amazing confidence in this race, and Lewis was also extremely good, but it was Max that got the better of him in this race towards the end of that season. Which then brings us into 2022, where we saw what was a very crazy accident between Alonso and Lance. Now, this obviously resulted from Lance moving late. Alonso gave what I thought was a pretty subtle reaction because he knew who was his teammate next year. He also knows who's the boss of Aston Martin, so he had to be subtle about it, but definitely a very late time to move for Lance resulted in Alonso catching some air for a bit, but the guy still finished in the points and had an amazing race, which was pretty crazy considering the amount of G's he must have been taking from the actual force of the car going down into the ground after taking flight. In 2023, we had also a very entertaining race, but the reason why I bring this up is Lando actually took the lead on lap 1 from Charles Leclerc, which was pretty insane for this time period. And Lando actually had a pretty good race here in 23. The car lost its tires towards the end. Lewis ended up getting a great overtake on him, but was not able to catch Max, and that resulted, with the very end of the race, showing us that Leclerc and Lewis were both disqualified for too much plank wear on the bottom of the car, and it made for a very eventful race in what was not a very eventful 2023 season. But these are just some moments, but we've had so many more, so many good racing moments in COTA. It's just a track that's built for pure Formula One cars. Now, this track does actually hold some NASCAR races. IndyCar goes here as well. It's very popular amongst the motorsports, but it's also got quite a lot of elevation, as you can see with this little, almost looking like a roller coaster chart, showing you how elevated turn 1 is, which then goes into turn 2. And a lot of these parts were inspired off of different F1 tracks and combined together to put what I think is a very well-made track. Sector 1 is pretty much of Japan, Sector 2 is its own little part, and Sector 3 is also its own little part by inspiration from other tracks. And because the track isn't flat, it also makes it very fun for overtakes, and we can see different moves in different areas of the track. We are going into this track with a C2, C3, and C4, which is the middle of the ground when it comes to the tires. Traction is going to be about a 4, tire stress is a 4, it could honestly be a 5. This track is always a 2-stopper. And braking can be pretty tough, especially in Sector 2. You gotta nail those braking zones, and same with Turn 1. It's very easy to lock up there. Downforce is actually ran at about a 4 out of 5, only because Sector 1 and Sector 3, you need that downforce. Even though Sector 2 has a big straight, and the big straight actually at the start-finish line, having the downforce is always much better for a track with a lot of corners and a lot of heavy braking zones. We ended up actually getting a preview of what the Haas overalls are going to look like. I'm a fan of this. I think it's going to look very cool on a track like this. They always do something for the American GP. That's all that we have for right now. We also actually ended up getting some insight on the 2024 and 2026 tires compared. As you can see how much smaller the actual width of the tire is. How much of a difference this will make is pretty marginal, but it's nice to see that the tires are getting a little smaller, so the cars should look a bit more agile and it should save down on the weight. How much, I'm not sure, but a little bit at the very least. But let's get into what it's like a lap over COTA. Also, I know you guys have been talking about the shirt. I'm wearing pink for breast cancer awareness for October. Thought it would be cool to have a pink shirt for the whole October. I'll go back through the rotation in November, but for now, for breast cancer awareness, let's just wear this nice Ferrari pink shirt for October. Starting a lap in COTA, going into that crazy elevation zone of turn 1 on the start finish line. This is a DRS zone, and braking is going to be very tough, but you want to go as right as possible to cut off as much of the corner going into turn 2, which will be full throttle. Going into turns 3 and 4, you're going to stay very high on the gears, but in full throttle, and then you're going to have to downshift going from 5 into 6, prioritizing the exit into 6 to prep up for a very difficult, slow section in turns 7, 8, and 9, which will result also in another hard braking zone. Then going full throttle into a very fast corner like 10, which then goes into a very hard braking zone of turn 11. There will be no overtakes here, but it will be set up for a very long straight into turn 12 where we definitely will see some overtakes, and DRS effectiveness is very important in this part for the overtaking. That's why they go for high downforce, some more DRS effectiveness. Going to turn 12 after the hard braking zone, we now go into another very tricky section which goes into sector 3. Turn 13 turns into 14, prioritizing the exit to then set up 15, which there is a possibility of seeing overtakes down the inside or the outside, depending on how much traction you have on the tire. And if you're Sebastian Vettel going on Kevin Magnussen in 2022, you could see a very insane overtake in turns 16, 17, and 18. Some of the best parts of the track when it comes to showing off the traction of these beautiful F1 cars, which then goes into 19, which is a slight brake. You want to go as right as possible, get the better exit here, going into a hard brake zone into turn 20, and then finishing off the lap, which is a lap around COTA. Very impressive, very technical, but also very fun to watch on the TV. But with that all out of the way, let's go over my predictions for the 2024 COTA GP. Now, obviously, as we always do it, best teams, worst teams, and my top 5. For the best teams, I've also made a video talking about the last 6 races, but obviously that could change now with the upgrades that are coming. With no knowledge of who's going to be up or down, I still think McLaren is going to be P1. They do have some updates coming here. I had Red Bull in P2, but some part of me is saying that it could be a tough track, specifically because of Sector 1 and then Sector 3. They've been struggling on the balance. You need a big balance here. It's all about getting that car in that perfect setup. I think McLaren's going to really nail it. I have some slight feeling that Ferrari is going to edge out Red Bull here for a P2, and I think Red Bull's going to be P3. It's going to be very close. I do think McLaren can take a pretty big gap here, but I think it'll be close amongst the other 3 of the top 4 teams. Then in the worst teams, I really think Sauber is going to struggle here pretty badly. In combination with the Alpine car, I think they're also going to be stuck here in P9. And some part of me is also saying that RB is going to struggle here as well. If Red Bull struggles, RB is just going to do even worse. That's always how it's been, especially with the suspension setup coming to this GP. I just have a feeling that those 3 teams are kind of locked down in our, not necessarily back markers, but the 3 worst. Haas, Aston Martin, and Williams are right now a step above of those 3 teams. But then that brings us into the top 5, and a lot of this is going to matter in the championship battle, but here's my top 5 for COTA, just going over it quickly. In P5, I'm actually going to put Max. I just have a feeling that this car is going to struggle here. He's really good on this track. I think he will make the difference. He will be able to get himself in P5, and this is for the full race. I'm not doing the sprint race. In P4, I'm going to put up Carlos Sainz. It's been a while since Carlos has had a great position, I think, in the last couple of GPs. Leclerc has definitely been the better driver out of the 2. I think P4 for Carlos right there. I think P3 for Leclerc. Leclerc is going to have a great race. Yet again, he's going to beat out Carlos. And in P2 and P1, if it's not obvious enough, I have Oscar in P2, Lando in P1. I don't know who's going to be ahead of the rest of them. I think even if Oscar is P1, they should give up the position just for the championship battle. It's Lando's chance to actually get some big points. And I fully believe that this McLaren car is going to really spread its wings and show off how good of a car it is. When you have the balance set up perfectly like they do, I think the McLaren's going to do very well here. But I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you guys think? What do you guys think of the top 5? Best teams, worst teams? Put them down below. Love to comment, love to chat about it. Please leave a like, subscribe. It would mean the world. And peace.